There's been a lot of talk about the Asian hornet, also called the murder hornet, in our media and our news feed. So today we're here with Tammy Horn Potter, Dr. Tammy Horn Potter from the KDA, who is going to discuss with us and answer some of our questions about the Asian hornet. Welcome. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a joy to be here.
Thank you. The first question is, just in general, can you tell us what is this murder hornet, this Asian hornet? Tell us a little bit about it.
So the Asian Giant Hornet has obviously it's located. Its home terrain is going to be over in Asia, India, Japan, China, southern China, more so northern India. It does like urban areas, so it makes it a little bit of a public health concern as far as those of us in North America are concerned. It can be very difficult to find compared to the hornets that we have in North America, which tend to build their nest up in trees. So they have aerial nests. The Asian Giant Hornet likes to build its nest in the rotten logs and things, so it's very difficult to find. It's not as easily seen as hornet nests here in North America are. But there are so many. It's like there are 20,000 different types of hornet bees. There are many different types of hornets. In North America, we have a bald-faced hornet that is native to our continent. What makes the Asian Giant Hornet of particular concern to us, those of us here in North America, is that first of all, it's an invasive. It's been brought in through storage containers. We assume, we don't know, and it can do disastrous damage to European honeybees that obviously did not acclimate with it. It didn't evolve with the Asian Giant Hornet. European honeybees, we have, the European honeybees have their own predators, but not this Asian Giant Hornet. So the Asian Giant Hornet, typically its average size is 2 inches. So it's the world's largest hornet. It is a social insect. The queen will mate at the end of the fall, and then she will survive through the winter time, and then as the temperatures warm up, she will start laying her workers and they will build a colony. I think it's quite interesting. They prefer sap if they can find it in Japan, and oak sap in particular, whereas our honeybees, of course, like nectar from flowers. But they also, being a hornet, are predatory. And so they get their protein from eating other insects, and they love honeybees. They love European honeybees, which hasn't developed a defense against the Asian Giant Hornet. Now, Asian honeybees, and there are several different species of Asian honeybees, have developed a defense against the Asian Giant Hornet. They create this intense heat around the Asian Giant Hornet soldier, and they will smother it that way. The European honeybees that we have, we just sampled out in Pete Zook's yard, they have not evolved to have that kind of defense. So that's our concern, because so much of our agriculture in this country is dependent upon beekeepers and European honeybees in particular. If the Asian Giant Hornet were to come and establish itself in the United States, it would have some tremendous, it would have hive predation is the phrase that we use for it, and they would definitely make an impact. Our food costs would go higher, so we would have to, and then of course beekeepers, this is a new threat. I mean, like I said, this thing is as long as the palm of my hand. Yeah. As the state apiarist, I don't want to deal with this. And so that's one of the things that, because it would have such an impact, I chose to participate in a federal grant called the Native Bee and Wasp Survey. We just started trapping last year in 2019. There had been 22 states that signed up to do this, but because bumblebees have been in decline in the Midwestern states like Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, those states dropped out. We ship horses in from around the world. They do have to be quarantined in LA, I think it's Miami and Chicago. before the horses are brought here, but still, bedding is a way. The Asian Giant Hornet made it to France on the bottom of a Chinese pottery vase. You know, so bedding, horse bedding to me could be a viable way that the hornet comes into our state. The other big industry that we have in our state is the bourbon industry, which of course requires wooden barrels. And so, so for me, I just wanted to have a better knowledge of our native bees in our state. And that's what this is. This is called a blue vein trap. This is obviously the blue vein. And this is filled with a bait of brown sugar. And sometimes I put yeast in it and sometimes I don't. And that yeast, then it acts as a lure.
Okay.
And so when the bumblebees and other native bees are flying through the field, they see this and they think, oh, this is a pretty interesting flower. Oh, this kind of has a unique odor. The brown sugar that I use is dark brown sugar. It has more molasses in it. And so it ends up, you know, the bees will be attracted to this and then they'll fall into this. And then I come along and simply every 2 weeks, simply screw this off and collect whatever has flown inside into a sample jar. And then that gets sent to Washington, D.C., where it's appropriately identified.
And so is that, in general, to get a baseline, like you talked about with the diseases in the hives, get a baseline of what our native bees look like?
That's
currently?
right.
Okay.
And the timing of it, too. And what we found last year was over 30 different species were added to our native bee inventory list. So that's the blue vein trap, and this is for native bees.
Okay.
Back to our topic of the Asian Giant Hornet, this is not fancy equipment. You know? This is what we use to trap hornets. You know, it's a simple white jug, we cut a hole in it, and I put the same type of bait in here, which is just brown sugar and water. And I will hang these in a variety of places. We have, the University of Kentucky has a research farm, so I have one out for that. I have an orchard on my personal farm, so I hang one up in that orchard because rotting fruit will attract hornets. They are attracted to the sugar in the rotting, the fermenting fruit. And then the other place that I have one of these traps out is beside the Amazon Fulfillment Center. It's really helpful to have these traps out at places where there's a lot of transportation because that's how invasives arrive, through airports, trains, and Amazon. You know, Amazon is busier now than it has been at Christmas time. You know, there's just trucks constantly coming in and out of that place. And so I have one of these outside the Amazon Fulfillment Center. If there are people who are interested in collecting hornets, you know, we do have an inventory. I'm happy to put them in touch with the person who's in charge. Just please understand that as a result of this article called Murder Hornets, all of us are overwhelmed with emails, with badly taken photos, with phone calls. We haven't stopped. I had 150 emails and phone calls in one day. And that's, you know, so she, you know, the person who's in charge of this grant has been inundated. Yeah. We all have been. I've never heard of the term murder hornet. You know, we've always...
Sells, though.
Oh, if it bleeds, it leads in the media, you know what I mean? But in Japan, they do call it the yak killer. In China, you know, so, I mean, you know, yak killer isn't nearly as, I think...
You know, if you've ever seen a yak, it kind of is a more intimidating name.
Exactly. I mean, you know, when the term murder hornet is used, it implies intent.
Yeah.
And these are, you know, I'm not anxious, and I'm certainly not, you know, a fan of Asian Giant Hornets, but they are defending themselves. Mm-hmm. And this is what insects do. I mean, in certain situations, such as cities, you know, there can be and have been fatalities. And so, you know, I'm in no way minimizing that, but to you know, to use that phrase as a murder hornet is implying that, you know, that there is a decision made by a colony which in no way matches biology. Yeah. It just doesn't. I mean, they will defend themselves as a honeybee colony will, as a bear will, as a human will.
Yeah.
You know, so the thing is to be smart and to notice your environment when you are outside, and don't poke a hornet's nest, as we say.
Yeah.
If you have an option, then walk away. And always, I mean, I like to remind people, because we just lost a leader in the honeybee world because she had severe allergies to honeybee stings. If you think that you are at all sensitive, make sure that you carry an EpiPen. If your students think that they are at all sensitive, it's a good idea to have your EpiPen as the very first piece of equipment you buy, before you buy a hive tool or a smoker or your jacket or anything else. Have an EpiPen, have liquid Benadryl. These are important first aid pieces that should never be overlooked.
So let's talk then, where currently is it known that there are Asian giant hornets?
Oh, that's
in
a
the
great
United States?
question. Yeah, that's a great question. So first of all, they're native to Asia, right? We know that. They were brought in, it's suspected, on the bottom of a piece of pottery from China to southern France in 2004. That's the first recording that we have of them leaving and being brought in. Again, that's how invasives travel, is on the bottoms of things. And so they showed up first in Vancouver last fall, September and October, and then in Blaine, Washington State, there was a sighting in December.
Of 2019.
Of 2019, that's correct. So this is a very recent, this is very recent for them to show up in North America. There is no sign that they have been anyplace else in the United States, certainly not in Kentucky. And Washington State has to be given credit. They have marshaled their forces, their beekeepers, the local beekeeping association, the Fish and Wildlife. I mean, it is all hands on deck. They are trying to find these nests. It's unusual to have a female Asian giant hornet flying in December. By that point in time, typically in Asia, she has hunkered down in her nest for the wintertime.
Okay.
So the fact that, that this, the one that was sighted in Blaine in Washington State was found in December, little concerning, but it was a warm winter. And the fact that the state is just responding with a lot of resources. In fact, they, even in this era of budget restrictions because of COVID-19, they are setting aside funding to hire people to try to make sure that they can get a good detection system in place. Obviously, we have this detection system in place that is federally funded. That's moving forward. No changes there. No changes in the funding there. And it's a modest amount of funding. It doesn't pay any of my salary. It pays the salary of one person to correctly identify the samples that we send. But we are trying to make sure that that hive is found and controlled. In other words, destroyed, so that it cannot send off any more colonies into the rest of the United States.
So how are they identified, or what should a person do if they think that they've seen? You don't want so many calls, but you need to weed out ones that are accurate.
So I think the easiest way is the size of the hornet. And I think many people are seeing European hornets because those are 1.5 inches. And I realize that 1/2 inch when
it looks like 3 when it's coming at you.
Exactly. I mean, you're just like, this thing is huge. and so, and I know that.
So literally measuring it before you assume it's 2 to 2.5 inches.
But who wants to do that? I mean, because then you have to catch it, right?
Yeah.
So, an easy way to differentiate between the European hornet and the Asian giant hornet. Now we have European hornets here in the United States. Those two are invasives, but they don't do the damage to honeybees that Asian giant hornets do. Is that if you look, so a hornet has 3 sections: a head, a thorax,
I might have a prop here
and an abdomen.
Because this is what
lovely.
my kids found in the backyard.
Oh, great.
So, and when we first did, it was dead already. Honestly, it was laying on the ground.
Right.
When we first did, I used Google Lens and took a picture. It gave me 2 options, and one of them was the Asian Giant Hornet.
Okay.
Now
good.
it can't get perspective of size.
Right.
And so my kids were really excited and also worried, and I said, no, they're not here. So let's figure out more.
Good.
And the one thing I could tell was it looked like the bands were different. These bands are a little skinnier. I don't know if that's a good way or not. Where the Asian Hornet, they seem to be more solid and all the way around. And also, as big as that looks, I could tell that it wasn't 2 inches because, like you said, palm.
Yeah.
Intimidating size, but not 2 inches.
And here's the other one that I think is easy for people to see once they have it in the state, and they're not worried about being stung. And because this one is dead, it's not as vibrant as when you first see it.
Okay.
But so here's its head, here's the thorax. This is the engine of both the wasps, the hornets, and the honeybees, all 3. And then this is the abdomen. So if you look at the thorax, there will be red little shields here. There's a red coloration.
The Asian Giant Hornet?
On the European Hornet.
Okay.
The European Hornet has a red coloration here, and it fades with time. That's critical, because if you lose that red coloration, then that's
gets it closer.
It's more difficult.
Okay.
That red. If you see that red, then you know, oh, that's European Hornet.
Okay.
But if it's an old a specimen, then you lose that, and so then you have to look a little closer at the bands and the size and other things. But a freshly, a hornet that's still alive or it's just been killed will have a vibrant red.
Okay.
And so then you know
and that's the European Hornet has the red. Okay.
That's right. The Asian Giant Hornet does not have that.
Okay.
That's a big difference. Our bald face hornet is going to be black and white, just straight black and white. It's not yellow at all.
Okay.
So that's another thing there. Yellow jackets are going to be yellow and black, but they are much tinier.
Smaller. Yeah.
To me, they are as painful as
they can seem 3 inches long
else.
as well.
Exactly. I mean, they pack a punch, but they can, they're much smaller than that. But hornets and wasps, they have a place in our evolutionary cycle and our chain of being. They are very good at controlling some garden insects that drive people crazy, so they can, they do have a place in our world, but it's best to leave them alone.
Yeah. Especially if they're 2.5 inches
That's
long.
right. Just walk
so if somebody
away.
does find one and they see no red and they are confident it's hitting the 2-inch mark, which I know we've said they're not here, so it's not likely, but in that case, who would be the proper person to contact?
So there is a state entomologist that is at UK, so they can they can either take a picture or send a sample to that person. They're welcome to send me a photo if they want identification, because we really value that. That's how we found out that they were in Washington State. Was a beekeeper saw it and thought, there's a red flag here. And so, we do depend upon the public input. And so, you're welcome to reach out to me. And if I identify it, then I will definitely let the authority, the state entomologist know, obviously DC know, and we will work on trying to find where that nest is. What we need to know is and again, I'm optimistic that Washington State is going to put control measures in place so that, I'm cautiously optimistic that Asian Giant Hornet will not show up in Kentucky for another 3 to 4 years, at least. we hope never. But it's a while is the point. But if somebody wants to send me a sample, I'm happy to take a look at it. But we need to know where it's found, geographic, lat longs. Okay. Where is the exact place that this was found? Because then that's going to be, we use the term contact tracing. We'll use that point to then go and look at all of the different places where its nest could be found. And remember, this is a hornet that likes to build its nest underground, in trees, very hard to see. Okay. Will be very hard to see. So you got to be careful.
Are there similarities to our climate or where it is now in Washington that might make it more susceptible to be able to continue to reproduce there, or is it the opposite? Is the climate there different enough, maybe cold enough to mitigate its spread naturally?
Well, the whole question about climate is so, first of all, it's a good question with no easy answers because our climate is changing so in such unpredictable ways. So I don't want to sound like I'm not answering your question, but for instance, here in Kentucky, this particular winter, 2019 to 2020, was unusually warm. I was doing inspections in February, the first week in February, because temperatures were in the 60s. I think that's one reason why people are seeing European hornets in abundance now. And we didn't really have what I would consider a winter with 3 and 4 snows. Mm-hmm. We just didn't. And Washington State, same thing. I mean, it was a much warmer winter for them. So I think, again, this is a type, the Asian Giant Hornet has a home in several different places in Asia. It's not as if Asia's one contained state like Kentucky is in the United States. It's in several different places, southern China, northern India, throughout Japan, so very different little microclimates in all of those regions. And like I said, I think it was just an exceptionally warm winter. Shipping containers, shipping is going back and forth. I think an interesting question, I don't have the answer, but I've been impressed by how genuinely concerned people are about bees. As a result of I think that the term murder hornet to me is misleading, but when people have reached out, I mean, they were talking about their neighbors who are beekeepers and were concerned about them and wanted to know if the specimen that they found could in fact harm their neighbors' bees. There are people who are worried about themselves as perfectly reasonable. If you have compromised immune systems, this will really, it could be a problem. And like I said, there have been fatalities, which is, it's not just a hive predation issue, it's a public safety issue too. That's one of the reasons why I chose to be a part of the grant. But people have responded to this in ways that suggest an awareness of their food supply and how dependent it is on honeybees, and what can they do to help. And so if you suspect that there is an Asian Giant Hornet, try, if we can use your specimen again, what will help us identify it is taking a picture of this thorax region. That's really what I'm looking for. Okay. Is I'm looking for that coloration there. Okay. And that's a big clue right off the bat. And if you see the red coloration, you don't even have to send it in. You just know that it's not an Asian Giant Hornet. So
for now, beekeepers need to be aware, observant, and know what to look for, but we're not in the position of taking steps to
we are in no way in an alarm state now. Should not be. I mean, again, it's always good to just be aware of the potential threats to your food supply, but the states, I'm not sure how many more states are going to participate as a result of this media attention, but certainly Washington State has reacted. And like I said, they've devoted money and they're trying to hire more personnel. And the beekeeping associations have really stepped up on this one. And I guess maybe that's why I'm not in a panic mode, because our state has 54 local bee associations, and the one thing that they're all different. It's just like barbecue sauce. It changes by the county line. You know? But the one thing I know about every single one of them, if something like this were to cross our state line, I could call on those bee associations, and there would be volunteers who would be there with their bee suits on. You know, we would be working on trying to find those nests and you know, destroying them. So again, I guess that's why I'm not more worried about that. You know, that and the fact that it's, you know, 2,000 miles away, and I have a feeling Washington State's going to take care of it.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you very much for answering questions.
Oh, you're welcome. I really enjoyed being on your show and sampling bees with you today. It's been a great day.
Thank you very much.